Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Megan, and I'm one of our events associates here at the Animal Legal Defense Fund. Today, we will be having our February Legislative Affairs Update. This webinar offers closed captioning. To turn on, please click the CC button at the bottom of your screen. We will also have a brief Q&A at the end of the presentation, and you can submit your questions anytime via the Q&A icon also at the bottom of your screen. Joining us today is Kim Kelly, along with our Legislative Affairs team. Kim is the director of our Legislative Affairs team, and they work to develop and advance our key legislative initiatives and to improve and create stronger animal protection laws. I'll pass things over to you, Kim.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan. Welcome, everybody. So glad that you could join us today for our Legislative Affairs Update webinar. We're really excited to get to talk about the work that we're undertaking this year and just take a brief look back at 2025 as well to celebrate some of those victories. Without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and pull up our PowerPoint. All right, so jumping in, I know many of you have joined us in the past, but did just want to reacquaint you with the team. I'm based in California. Our Strategic Legislative Affairs Manager, Kathleen Schatzman, is in New Jersey, and she also covers New York as well in her work. Alicia Prygoski is another Strategic Legislative Affairs Manager based in Virginia, and she manages Florida as well as some of our federal work. Stephanie Harris is located in Vermont, and she manages many of the New England states. Jennifer Haig is in Oregon and is a senior legislative affairs manager along with Steph. And Jennifer manages California and some of the other southwestern states. Allison Ludke is a legislative affairs manager based in DC and manages the majority of our federal portfolio. Lindsay Verheileg is based in Oregon and has a smattering of Midwest states along with a very coveted Hawaii. And Kat Kelly is our Legislative Affairs Fellow based in Washington, who manages our Washington legislative work and has the challenging task of covering the rest of the country as well to keep us updated on legislation that's active there. We have limited bandwidth given the size of our team, but we try to stay apprised of as much animal legislation impacting our work as possible and weigh in wherever we can. So just to give you a snapshot of where we are, this is the current states that are in session as of this morning. I think even the National Conference of State Legislatures is still updating their system because I believe Connecticut is in session as of today as well. But this just gives you a good idea that most states have convened for the year and are currently meeting to talk about their legislative work. Most of the other states, excuse me, will convene as well and will start meeting either later this month or next. There are a handful of states this year, including Texas, Nevada, and Montana, that do not have regular sessions, and so they will not be meeting this year. Just to give you an idea of some of the work that we accomplished last year, just wanted to give you a snapshot there. We worked in 39 different jurisdictions, covering 276 pieces of legislation. And this work varied. Some of it we were just monitoring and perhaps provided an action alert or submitted testimony and support, while others we were very, very active in lobbying and leading efforts. But all told, still quite a few bills that we were covering across the country at the local, state, and federal levels. We had 38 legislative victories, and that included 27 bills that were signed into law, and importantly, the defeat of 11 pieces of legislation that were counter to animals' interests as well. Just looking at a handful of the legislative trends that we saw last year as well. This is by no means comprehensive as to all the issues that we worked on, but a handful of the issues that we covered in multiple jurisdictions. That included puppy mills. On that issue in California, we saw quite a bit of success with a trio of complementary bills. That focused primarily on online sales and broker bans and increased transparency of animals sold in the state. New Jersey also saw quite a bit of success with several other local ordinances passed to prohibit retail sales of animals. They passed the 150 municipal threshold, and I believe we're now at 155. So continuing to build momentum for statewide success in New Jersey. And then we also worked in coalition to help defeat a preemption bill in North Carolina that would have prohibited municipalities from enacting retail sales bans. We worked on pets and housing issues in a number of states, as well as Washington, D.C. In DC, Roscoe's Law was enacted that ends breed-specific legislation or discrimination against certain breeds of animals in housing. It also caps the pet rent and ends non-refundable pet fees in the District of Columbia. Nevada and Colorado passed similar bills. In Nevada, the law expands previously implemented prohibitions on the use of dog breeds and underwriting liability insurance to commercial multifamily landlord policies, and also requires state-financed supportive housing to be pet-friendly. In Colorado, a similar bill was passed, and now all state-financed affordable housing must allow pets and expands the ban on insurance-free discrimination to landlord policies as well. We saw tremendous success with cat declawing legislation, with bans enacted in Massachusetts, California, and Rhode Island. There was also a federal resolution introduced earlier this year. It was teed up and ready to go at December and was introduced just at the beginning of this year. And then Illinois also saw the passage of a couple of ordinances and resolutions as well at the municipal level. We had quite a bit of work covered on natural disasters. In Florida, a tethering, and it's now illegal to abandon or tether an animal during a natural disaster. And in California, the Found Act was passed, which ensures that companion animals are protected during emergencies, and local governments implement clear procedures to support pet owners during evacuations. And in Washington, a co-sheltering bill was enacted as well. We worked defensively on cage-free repeals. This is for states that have enacted laws that prohibit extreme confinement of egg-laying hens, but there was an effort in a number of states to repeal that legislation. In Arizona, the implementation was delayed, but we were still able to effectively end the repeal, as well as in Colorado and Oregon, we were able to stop that legislation as well. And then finally, the last trend that we noticed last year was in coercive control and domestic violence. In California, animals were added to the stalking definition so that you can't make threats against one's pet. That's also illegal. And then as well in Pennsylvania, a pet protective orders ban was passed. You'll hear today some of these issues trending into 2026 as well. We're hoping to build on the momentum for those bills enacted in some states, adding others to the list, but you'll also notice that quite a few other issues we'll be working on this year too. Before we jump in further to what we're working on this year, we'd like to just start with a poll and ask where you're joining us from today. Do you live primarily in an urban, suburban, rural area, or perhaps on a tribal territory or other? We should see those results here momentarily. Okay, looks like we've got a pretty good split with a lot of people in urban areas, some in suburban, a little less in rural, and a few joining us from territories or tribal lands or other. All right, and I'm going to hand it over to Steph to get us started on our 2026 updates.
Thank you so much, Kim. So I'm going to kick things off with Massachusetts. Massachusetts has a 2-year legislative session. So it runs right now from January 2025 last year through the end of this year, 2026. So we're at essentially the halfway point right now. And at this point, we have a lot of animal protection bills that have thankfully made it out of their initial joint committee, and those are issue-specific committees. And so these bills are now in a second committee, and those second committees are chamber-specific. In some cases, the Senate bill moved out, some House, in some cases, both. And just yesterday, I was down at the State House talking about these bills. We co-hosted a pause and policy day at the State House for legislators and staff. It was an animal protection bill information day, essentially, and we co-hosted that together with the MSPCA, Animal Rescue League of Boston, as well as Humane World. And so today I want to highlight some of these bills that are moving this session in Massachusetts, and I've organized these somewhat by chamber so that anyone who's joining us from Massachusetts can reach out to their state rep about bills that are out on the House side and their senator about bills that are out on the Senate side. So bills that are out on the House side include a humane protection bill against neglect. So that creates a civil protection order against animal neglect. And that's as an alternative to felony cruelty charges, because Massachusetts is currently the only state in the country that only has a felony for animal cruelty. We don't have a misdemeanor or something that gets at those situations that haven't yet escalated to warrant a felony. And so this is seeking to provide one path toward earlier intervention. Also, pet inclusive public housing. This focuses specifically on seniors in state aided housing, ensuring that they have the ability to live with companion animals subject to certain reasonable rules. Dog breeder standards. Right now, we don't have minimum standards in place for breeders, although we do for other types of kennels as of last session, thanks to a bill known as Ollie's Law. Also, alternatives to animal testing for products. That's household products, cleaners, chemicals used in paint, and as well as cosmetics. Ivory and rhino horn sales, as well as a broader housing bill that deals with both housing and insurance related breed discrimination. It does things like prohibit blanket pet bans or excessive pet fees in certain types of housing, and additionally promotes housing stability for low-income families with pets. On the Senate side, that housing and insurance breed discrimination bill is also out, as well as retail sales of dogs, cats, and rabbits. So that's the type of legislation that allows for animals to be made available in partnership with shelters or rescues, but not sold from pet stores that source from commercial breeding facilities known as puppy mills. Ivory and rhino horn sales, that intrastate trafficking, as well as the alternatives to animal testing. And related to that, there's also a new bill this session, cruelty-free cosmetics sales. And so that bans the sale of cosmetics that are tested on animals, except with certain exemptions, like if it's federally required, for example. And that brings Massachusetts into alignment with a number of other states. Funding for what's called the Mass Animal Fund, which provides for low-cost spay, neuter, and vaccination services to low-income families with companion animals in the state, and pet custody. So that is also a new file this session. And it allows judges to consider the well-being of an animal in divorce and legal separation. So that acknowledges pets as more than traditional property. It mirrors laws that are in place in 8 other states, as well as Washington, D.C., and is one of the things that has been trending in recent years. A bill that allows for the issuance of civil citations for keeping certain animals in cruel conditions. It expands a law that exists for dogs, but makes sure that it applies to other types of animals. Rodenticides legislation to restrict the use of those second-generation anticoagulant rodenticides. And interestingly, Mass Audubon has shared results of a regional study that showed that 100% of 43 hawks had rodenticides in their system. And MSPCA also treats about 50 cases of companion animals that are suffering from rodenticide poisoning per year. And then thinking about Rhode Island, it has a more typical January to around June legislative session. It's early-ish in the session for them, so bills are still being filed, and bills that have already been filed have just started to have hearings. So there's a few bills that have already been filed that relate to sales, legislation prohibiting the sale of farmed fur products, and that's in the Senate Environment and Ag Committee, as well as the sale of uh, of products from force feeding birds, so foie gras, and this prohibits both the force feeding and the sale of products that come from that practice. It's also in the Environment and Ag Committee on the Senate side. And there's a retail sales bill, one of those puppy mills type bills, except this one focuses specifically on parrots. And then there's also a couple bills that deal with animal cruelty and domestic violence in Rhode Island. And those are actually scheduled for a hearing tomorrow in Rhode Island. So if you happen to be in Rhode Island and are able to offer written or verbal testimony, you do have an opportunity. These bills are being heard by the House Judiciary Committee, and they build on existing law. In 2019, there was an expansion of the existing protective orders law that allowed for family courts to include pets in those protective orders. And then in 2024, there was the pet custody legislation that became law that allows for courts to evaluate the animal's interest in divorce and legal separation. And so the two bills that are pending would ensure that family courts may specifically and explicitly award custody of a companion animal to the plaintiff as part of the protective order. And then the other one includes animal cruelty offenses to the domestic violence crimes that are committed by a family or household member against another. So I would welcome your engagement on those and the bills that continue to be filed in Rhode Island. Thank you so much.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I will be providing Alicia's updates today as she is currently on the ground in Florida for a Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission meeting. Florida has a very short session this year that began early January and runs through the end of March. Some bills that Alicia is focusing on this year are the Manta Protection Act, which is formally known as the Marine At-Risk Native, Threatened, and Endangered Animal Protection Act. This bill would prohibit the capture of threatened or endangered marine species from Florida waters. It was introduced in response to a viral video taken in July of a manta ray struggling to break free as she was captured and hauled onto a boat. Even though manta rays are threatened species, she was sent to live out the rest of her life in captivity at SeaWorld Abu Dhabi. The Manta Protection Act would close the loophole in Florida, in the Florida law that allowed this. The bill has been introduced in the House and Senate, and we're working with the bill sponsors to get hearings in both chambers. Alicia is also working on domestic violence laws. The Domestic Emergency and Batterers Reform and Accountability Act addresses the indisputable link between domestic violence and animal abuse. As introduced, it would make two significant changes. Add animal abuse to the definition of domestic violence under Florida law, and add the threat of harm to a victim's companion animal to the list of actions that can be considered coercive control when determining whether to grant a protective order. Both the House and the Senate versions passed through their first committees unanimously. The House version has been narrowed down to only include protective orders, but we're still supportive of both versions and are working with both sponsors on the bills. Alicia was also in Florida last month for the annual Humane Lobby Day. The Animal Legal Defense Fund co-hosted Florida Humane Lobby Day with Humane World for Animals in January. They had a great day at the Capitol and were joined by advocates who came to lobby for animals from all over the state. They were also incredibly fortunate to host guest speakers, Representative Lindsay Cross, who is the lead sponsor of the Manta Protection Act, Representative Peggy Gossett-Seidman, and Representative Linda Cheney, who has introduced another bill that we support this session, which would increase penalties for animal fighting in front of children. All three of these representatives are incredible animal advocates, and we are lucky to have them fighting for animals in the Florida legislature. They were also joined by Dennis Richard with Water Planet US, who took the viral video of the manta ray being captured from the ocean in July. Without that video, none of this advocacy on behalf of manta rays would have been possible. All of the guest speakers were compelling and inspiring and added to an overall successful day for animals. If anybody watching attended Florida Humane Lobby Day, thank you so much for your advocacy. Alicia wanted me to pass that on to you. Alicia has also provided an update from the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, first on trapping. The FWC is in the process of revamping Florida's fur bearer trapping regulations for the first time in 50 years. ALDF has been involved in the stakeholder input process for the past 3 years and has pushed FWC to make humane changes. Alicia is testifying before FWC as they consider a final vote on the regulations. Though there are a lot of changes we're opposing, we are hoping that the FWC will adopt some humane changes, such as a ban on glue traps outdoors. The FWC is also hearing public input on the same manta ray issue that the Manta Protection Act addresses. They're looking at revising their Marine Special Activities License, the process that essentially creates the loophole in Florida law, allowing for the capture of threatened species for entertainment. Alicia is testifying on this as well, and will be asking FWC to prohibit all capture of threatened and endangered species for public display. I want to thank you all so much and thank Alicia for all she's doing on the ground in Florida today. And I'm going to pass it on to Lindsay.
Thank you, Kathy. So many great things happening. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Lindsay Verheilig. I'm a Legislative Affairs Manager based right outside of Portland, Oregon. I'm going to just dive right into some of the work happening across the states that I cover. But like always, this is just a small snapshot of what's happening, and more opportunities continue to arise as session moves forward. I will start with Missouri, where we have a handful of really exciting animal bills making their way across the legislature. Session started in Missouri in January and runs through May. One of ALDF's priority bills this year is Teddy's Law. You may have heard me talk about this in the past, but this bill came about from an incident where Teddy, a 13-pound blind and deaf family dog, was fatally shot by an officer after the family called the police for help finding him. It was a really devastating incident that rocked the town of Sturgeon, Missouri, and unfortunately, it wasn't the first of its kind in Missouri, and it certainly won't be the last without intervention. ALDF is working really hard to get justice for Teddy and his family. Late last year, Teddy's family received a $500,000 settlement from the city of Sturgeon, and we are now working hard to pass Teddy's Law, which would require officers to undergo 4 hours of additional training, covering things like canine behavior and how to de-escalate situations with dogs using non-lethal methods. Another ALDF-led bill is the addition of starvation and dehydration into the definition of animal torture, which carries higher penalties than regular animal cruelty. This is aimed directly at puppy mills in the state who have consistently been found with dogs lacking adequate food and water and just in horrific conditions. Another bill that we're happy to support is cross-reporting, which would require the mandatory reporting of animal abuse by certain human welfare workers, on top of a requirement for animal control officers to report suspected child abuse. This bill is a really important step in protecting both children and animals in the state from suspected abuse and highlights the link between human and animal violence. Finally, for Missouri, I will turn to some of the defense that we'll be playing this year. Looking at the disposition bill, there is a bill that aims to weaken the state's animal cruelty disposition process. So this would make it harder to take animals into safety during animal cruelty investigations. It would also make it more difficult to prosecute offenders effectively. We also work every single year to fight back against bills aimed at preempting cities and counties from implementing animal protection measures. These are called preemption bills, and these measures include declaw bans. So this year is no different. We will continue to fight tooth and nail against these bills. And Missouri session is just ramping up, so stay tuned for more updates and more opportunities and potentially more bills being introduced. I'll turn now to Hawaii. Hawaii session also started in January and runs through May. Again, this year, ALDF's major priority is octopus farming, which, as you'll hear today from other panelists, is gaining traction across the country. Last year, we made good momentum on the House and Senate bills to prohibit octopus farming in Hawaii, and we will continue to fight for those protections this year. I'll also be supporting several other priorities this year, including bills to eliminate breed restrictions in housing insurance, as well as requiring public housing to allow pets with no breed restrictions. We'll also continue to support a bill to increase criminal penalties for animal abuse, along with some other bills, including providing immunity to Good Samaritans who rescue animals from hot cars, and the establishment of a spay and neuter fund aimed at curbing Hawaii's free roaming cat population. Finally, I will mention one of the initiatives happening in Oregon. This year is a super short session in Oregon, which happens every other year. Session started this past Monday and runs for a quick 30 days. So the legislature is hyper-focused on just a handful of priorities. Luckily, one of those is a really great wildlife bill known as 1% for wildlife or 1.25% for wildlife. And this bill would increase the state's transient lodging tax, which would affect mainly tourists in the state, and put that funding directly into wildlife conservation and coexistence efforts. These efforts include reducing and prioritizing non-lethal remedies to wildlife conflict, strengthening anti-poaching enforcement, supporting habitat connectivity and restoration, and investing in programs that benefit both wildlife and communities. This bill actually has a hearing this afternoon, so if there's anyone in Oregon that wants to get involved, please reach out to me. I can provide details. Public testimony will be accepted through Friday, 48 hours after the hearing. So this is a really great opportunity to have your voice heard. And I think that's it for me. I think I'm passing it to Kat.
All right, thank you so much, Lindsay. Hi, everybody. I'm Kat Kelly, the Legislative Affairs Fellow. A significant portion of my work, as Kim had mentioned at the start, involves tracking and monitoring bills across the entire country to make sure that ALDF can stay on top of what's happening in any given state. I analyze both bills we support and those we oppose to develop strategic response and work with coalition members on the ground in those states to get the protections animals need and deserve. In addition to this nationwide monitoring and response, I also manage Washington State. For those who don't know, the Washington State Legislature operates on a biennium beginning in odd years and ending in even years. This means that bills which are introduced in odd years but do not pass will be carried over to pick up right where they left off in the following even year, in addition to all of the new bills that get introduced in the even year. But the extra kicker is that even years like this one, 2026, are short sessions. Not as short as Oregon, it sounds like, but they are still only 2 months long. So this means things change fast, and we're already about halfway through session. This next week and a half will determine which bills have passed their first chamber, either the House or Senate, and continue to the opposite chamber, and which bills will be considered dead and have to be reintroduced next year. All that to say, the update I give you today could actually be out of date as soon as tomorrow. However, this is where our work stands today and what we are looking forward to. This year, ALDF is co-leading a coalition to ban rodenticides in Washington. The bill we currently have introduced would be a first step to a ban by placing a moratorium on all anticoagulant rodenticides, as well as those containing bromethalin, while requiring research into alternatives such as rodent birth control. This is critical work because in addition to rodenticides killing rodents in extremely painful ways, rehab facilities and the Stillaguamish tribe in Washington have documented predators such as bald eagles and the endangered Cascades red fox, consuming the poison as well as poisoned animals and dying. This indicates that these poisons are working their way through the ecosystem. Rodenticides also pose a danger to our companion animals and children, even when properly used. Unfortunately, this bill is not going to be moving this year, but we are gearing up for a multi-year campaign, beginning with this moratorium and eventually getting these rodenticides banned. We are also continuing work on farmed octopus. Washington has already banned octopus farming, but HB 1608 will expand that ban to include the sale and distribution of farmed octopus and farmed octopus products within the state. This bill will hopefully be going to the House floor for a vote soon. It's been progressing very nicely this year. And same with the declaw ban in Washington. For those of you who have been with us before, you know that banning cat declawing has been a campaign we've worked on for years. So I'm really happy to say that this ban is moving forward this year, so far without any opposition. So we're expecting it to continue moving forward, and we'll hopefully have good news for you in a couple of months. We're also continuing our work from 2025 on a force-fed foie gras ban. For those who don't know, foie gras is a product made from poultry liver taken from birds who have been force-fed until their liver swells up to 10 times its normal size and develops characteristics akin to fatty liver disease. It's an inherently cruel practice. This bill will prohibit force-fed foie gras in any species of bird, as well as ban the sale, transportation, possession, and distribution of any products containing any product made from this process. I am extremely happy to announce that just this morning, this bill was voted out of its committee, which means it will be progressing forward, hopefully to a floor vote soon. Another bill we're excited to be a part of is a continuation of our work against animal testing. HB 2542 applies specifically to drug testing and requires that whenever there is an improved, equal quality test alternative to animal testing, it must be used in place of animal testing. Due to timing, this bill is unlikely to move at this point, but we are continuing to work to improve its language and increase the breadth of animals it protects, so this will not be the last time you hear of it. Over in the Senate, we continue to support a bill that is up for a Senate floor vote, which creates funding and project plans for wildlife crossings, such as over and underpasses throughout the state. These types of crossings have been found to significantly decrease vehicle collisions with wildlife, while helping wild animals to expand and move through their territories, thus improving their health and resiliency. And while we have loads of good work being done in Washington, unfortunately, a fight continues to protect our wolves and pinnipeds, which include seals and sea lions. Several bills and motions this year have been aimed at increasing lethal management, claiming sustainability and protection of other species. Wolves have not yet recovered in Washington, and they are found to have a negligible impact on deer, a species that proponents of lethal management are claiming are suffering because of wolves. Thankfully, none of the bad wolf bills look like they're going to succeed. Unfortunately, there is significant bipartisan support for killing pinnipeds with the false belief that it will protect salmon populations. Science does not back this stance, and scapegoating pinnipeds ignores the known causes of salmon population decline, which is human activity such as pollution, habitat loss, and dams. Happily, as of this morning, it appears that HB 2131, SB 5851, and SJM 8013, all of which would harm pinnipeds, are not going to move forward. We are continuing to educate legislators and show them that killing pinnipeds is not the solution they've been led to believe it is, and we will continue to oppose the final pinniped bill, HJM 4004, and hopefully stop its movement in the Senate. So that is a lot of information for you to digest, but if you live in Washington, I encourage you to get in touch with me if you'd like to hear how you can get involved and help protect all of these animals. Session is moving fast, but together we really can make a difference. And with that, I believe we have another poll question for you.
We do, and we'll get to that momentarily. But I just wanted to thank you, Kat, again for monitoring the work in the nation. It really is a big task to stay apprised of all of the bills that have been introduced, and just wanted to give a quick shout out to our law student externs as well. With all the bills being introduced this time of year, they're helping us manage the bills that are coming in for review. So just wanted to give thanks to them too. Thanks, Kat. All right, so our next poll question, we just want to get an idea of how long you've been involved and part of the animal protection movement. So let us know what your journey's been. Okay, looks like quite a few have been part of the movement for a long time, so it's great to see you coming back and staying on top of what's happening in the legislative realm. Also great to see some of the folks who are newer to animal protection, and glad that you're here and learning more about it, as well as everybody in between. Kathy, handing it back over to you.
I'm back on. Okay, so as Kim had mentioned earlier, I cover New York and New Jersey primarily. I'm going to start with an update from New Jersey, which is at the beginning of a new 2-year legislative session with a new governor. But in order to start the conversation, we have to go back to the end of last session. I do want to provide an update on the Humane Pet Store bill. So at the very end of the last session, which is unfortunately known as lame duck, the last few months of the end of a session. The session concluded in January, and the Humane Pet Store bill moved farther than we initially believed possible. For many of you that have been working in the movement, if you're in New Jersey, you know that this is an issue we've been working on for a decade. And, we've had some successes. And then lately, the last few years, we really haven't had a lot of movement. We have educated the legislature. We've gone out to Kim's point with ordinances, 155 ordinances in the state. We're waiting for the tipping point. And because it was lame duck, we just didn't think that there was going to be an opportunity for passage. But we were pleasantly surprised. And due to the very strong coalition that we have of state and national organizations working alongside exceptional advocates, we gained traction. And the leadership in New Jersey decided to allow it to move. And so it was posted, the bill was posted in both the Senate and Assembly committees, where, of course, we testified in support, and they passed. Due to, I think this was really due to our collective outreach. But unfortunately, it became a timing issue, and we just simply ran out of time. We had some great momentum. We're going to continue the fight this year. We're farther than we've ever been before. And I think, again, just building, like continuing to do what we've done is essential. We've got a new governor now. We have the same leadership, so we do see a path for movement on this bill this session. So we're really excited about that. It was just so heartbreaking. We were so close, but we really did just run out of time at the end of the year. In New Jersey, we're also going to be focusing on cross-reporting for animal cruelty this year. We've been in discussions with potential sponsors to introduce a bill. And I think we've briefly discussed that cross-reporting is a multidisciplinary approach to reporting suspected abuse. Laws ensuring that the agencies responsible for investigating various forms of abuse regularly communicate with one another and report that abuse to the proper authorities is crucial to protecting both humans and animals. Again, dozens of studies document the strong link between animal cruelty and violence against humans, particularly the link between animal abuse and other forms of abuse, such as elder abuse, child abuse, and domestic violence. And that's really the intersection here. And we have gotten tremendous feedback. So that's going to be our focus for this year. We'll also be supporting bills that add training on coercive control. As others have mentioned, that abusers frequently threaten to injure or kill companion animals to exert power, instill fear, and isolate victims, and it often prevents them from leaving dangerous situations due to fear for their pet's safety. Bills that we will be supporting will add domestic violence training, including coercive control for judges and law enforcement officers, and require that state domestic violence public awareness campaigns add information on coercive control. ALDF will also continue to support a wildlife killing contest ban to prohibit the cruel and unnecessary killing of wildlife at competitive events for cash and prizes. There are at least 4 annual killing contests that we know of in New Jersey, so this is very much a relevant issue. Moving on to New York, this is the second of a 2-year session, and we're so excited to have worked with Senator Skoufis and his staff on 2 important bills that were recently introduced. A pet protection order bill, which authorizes the courts, upon issuance of an order of protection, to order exclusive care, custody, and control of certain companion animals to the petitioner. And psychological evaluation for animal cruelty, which requires principals convicted of certain animal cruelty offenses to undergo a pre-sentencing forensic psychological evaluation and attend treatment. We will also continue to support the Wild Animal Traveling Acts ban to prohibit the use of bears, wildcats, and non-human primates in circuses or traveling acts. Our organization stands firmly against traveling animal acts due to the immense suffering involved in the training, transportation, and exhibition of wild animals. In addition, forcing wild animals into close proximity to humans creates a serious public safety risk. And there have been numerous incidents of animals escaping, injuring, or even killing staff and or members of the public. And finally, in New York, ALDF is part of an amazing coalition of partners who are all working to ban octopus farming in New York before the industry can get a foothold. We know that octopus farming is inherently inhumane, as octopus have significant cognitive abilities. We're educating legislators on the issue this year and building support and co sponsorship for this campaign. As noted before, ALDF has successfully worked on this issue in Washington State, which was the first in the world to ban octopus farming. And good luck, Kat, on the sales ban as well this year. And more recently in California. Congratulations, Jennifer. We aim to enact a ban in New York next. Thank you. And now on to Jennifer.
Thanks, Kathy. Hi, everybody. Jennifer Haig. I am going to give you an update on 3 of my 4 states that are in session this year, with the exception being Texas, that only meets every other year. Starting in California, this is the second year of a 2-year session, similar to what Steph was speaking about regarding Massachusetts. One characteristic of this session that I want to point out is the fact that last year it was announced that members would be limited in the number of bills they could introduce, and it was reduced from a maximum of 50 to a maximum of 35, and that's over the entire 2-year session. Some could have been in the first, some in the second year, but overall no more than 35 bills per member. What that means is we and all the other groups that we commonly work with are finding it a lot harder to find authors for bill ideas. There are just so many competing priorities that the field is much smaller now. So that kind of colors what I'm about to talk about. The first bill I want to speak about has a line through it because I wanted to make it clear that this bill is not moving forward however, I did want to speak to it. That is the Captive Wild Animals Public Contact Ban that was introduced last year as AB 892. We co-sponsored it with the Humane World for Animals and Performing Animal Welfare Society, and it would have prohibited public encounters such as hand feeding, petting, holding, or playing with a number of species held in captivity. Specifically, and where it started out, non-human primates, bears, elephants, sloths, otters, kangaroos, wallabies, servals, and carousels. Unfortunately, the bill didn't move forward last year due to challenges with opposition and legislative leadership wanting to amend the language in a way that we couldn't get on board with. It was too extreme. So we parked the bill and took it up in the interim to start again this year. However, despite a lot of work on it behind the scenes and deciding ultimately to take an amendment to restrict it to just 3 species, bears, elephants, and non-human primates, there just wasn't a path forward this session due to ongoing opposition from certain stakeholders and the desire by the committee to exempt educational opportunities. And that would have set a really bad precedent for future legislation elsewhere, and not been impactful enough as a law. So unfortunately, this bill will not be moving forward this session. What will be, however, potentially, there are things are in a flux with status on some of these bills. So the first I want to speak about is the retail pet sales ban expansion. We are currently seeking an author, but should it be successful and get introduced in a couple weeks, it would expand the current ban on the retail sale of dogs, cats, and rabbits, which California was the first to pass such a law. Would expand that to birds and other mammals such as guinea pigs, hamsters, chinchillas, rats, and mice. There would be 2 exemptions, 1 for poultry and 2 for, unfortunately, rats and mice that are advertised to be sold as live feed for certain reptiles. There was just no way we could get around the latter. We are currently working in a coalition with World Animal Protection, who successfully passed a local ordinance in West Hollywood, which often takes on the bleeding edge of animal protection issues. So just last fall, they passed an even more comprehensive ban. And additionally, there are a couple of smaller sanctuaries that specialize in small mammals and birds. And we are working hard to secure an author and have this bill move forward this session. So look for more information on that coming soon. The next bill I want to speak about is the Ethics Over Aesthetics Act. This is one that's being led by our friends at Social Compassion and Legislation, but we are supportive of the bill. This would prohibit the sale of animals that have been genetically modified for cosmetic purposes, such as the glow-in-the-dark rabbit pictured here, which has been or have been created as part of scientific research in gene editing, but are not currently commercially available. So this bill is preventative, like the octopus farming law we helped pass in 2024. This bill was introduced last year, so it was fast-tracked this year to meet legislative deadlines for what are called two-year bills, like the one I mentioned that's not moving forward. It was parked, so it had to get all its progress done in January in the first chamber. And the good news is it unanimously passed the Assembly just last week. And so the next step up for it is it will be referred to a Senate committee so it can start the process in the second chamber. The next bill is the Tenant Landlord Companion Animal Transparency Act, also one that is not currently introduced, but seeking an author, and we'll know more in a couple weeks. The Michelson Center for Public Policy is leading on this, and the idea is it would require upfront standardized disclosure of rental housing policies regarding companion animals, which would reduce disputes, prevent hidden fees, provide landlords with clear enforcement authority, and strengthen housing stability, all of which will help with companion animals and the people that love them and want to give them a home. Let's see, I'll go to Arizona next. The first bill that we are helping to support there is a cosmetics testing sales ban, which I didn't have a chance. No, the bill number is there. Okay. This ban, like it sounds, this bill would ban cosmetic products from being sold in Arizona if animal testing took place during the development or manufacturing process, similar to the 12 other states that currently have laws to this effect. The good news on this bill, it has just passed the first Senate Policy Committee, and it will be up for a Senate floor vote soon. Not yet introduced, but a bill we are supporting should it move forward is pet ownership in planned communities. This is being led by Humane World for Animals. It would ban breed-specific restrictions in HOAs. So again, still seeking a bill sponsor. Look for more information if it moves forward on that front. And then finally, in New Mexico, which similar to what Lindsay was describing about Oregon with a short session, New Mexico has an even shorter session as well, only 30 days. Animal Protection Voters is leading on the two bills that I'm going to speak about here, and we are supporting their efforts on the ground. The first is Pets in Domestic Violence Protection Orders, which is SB 80. I didn't get to note that, so for those of you who want to look up any particular language, this would define coercive control animal abuse as domestic violence and allow pets to be included in protection orders, similar to what California passed last year. And then the cockfighting refinements bill is SB 74. This would make spectating a cockfight illegal and increase the penalty for cockfighting from a misdemeanor to a felony on the first offense, as it already is for dogfighting. So because the session is so short and it typically only deals with particular issues around the budget or bills that were vetoed in the prior session, the governor has to pull forward any other bills that aren't germane to those issues So these fell into that category. So they have a chance, but there's such a short runway to pass bills that it's unclear if these will move forward this year. They may need to be reintroduced next year to move forward. So that's it from my state's region. And if we'll go to the next slide, I am also going to fill in for Allison today, providing an overview of federal efforts. On that front, we are now in the second year of Congress's two-year session as well, and it's already shaping up to be a busy one. To begin, Congress is still working through the FY26 appropriations, which in a perfect world should be passed every September, but in practice normally requires extensions, also known as continuing resolutions. As they finalize FY26, they'll also begin work on funding the government for FY27. But meanwhile, Congress has also yet to pass a new farm bill, which was due to be reauthorized by September of 2023. More on that later. In the FY 2026 appropriations bills, ALDF has secured several wins for animals, including language directing the USDA for increased transparency and reporting on enforcement actions and confiscations under the Animal Welfare Act, increased research into more humane depopulation methods to address the continued outbreak of avian flu, a report on downed livestock, including scope of the issue, welfare concerns, and public health threats, and continued funding for the PAWS Act, which stands for the Pet and Women Safety Act, which provides grants for emergency and transitional shelter options for domestic violence survivors with companion animals. So in FY27, we will be advocating for these issues and continuing to push back against harmful policy riders that undermine the Endangered Species Act, spread misinformation about Prop 12, that's from California, and erode progress made towards increasing non-lethal alternatives used in wildlife coexistence. So moving on to the Farm Bill, as mentioned earlier, the 2018 Farm Bill expired in September of 2023, and Congress has yet to enact a new one, instead extending existing authorities through short-term measures while negotiations continue. But, and the reason why I'm filling in for Allison today, no, sorry, that's the next thing. Never mind. But after months of delay, the House Agriculture Committee will hold a markup on Farm Bill text at the end of February, in a few weeks. We expect the text to contain similar provisions that the 2024 Farm Bill text had, including the Save Our Bacon Act text, which, as you may recall, is the current version of the EATS Act to try to roll back animal welfare standards from California Prop 12 and Massachusetts Question 3, codifying subpar enforcement standards under the Animal Welfare Act, allowing federal funds to support mink farming, and expanding the sale of uninspected meat, and undermining humane slaughter laws. So prior to this markup, we will be encouraging our members to urge their representatives to oppose this bill, and we hope you'll consider taking action when we reach out to you. On the Protecting Local Zoos Act, another defensive action we have encouraged our members to take is to urge their representatives to oppose the misleadingly named Protecting Local Zoos Act, which is HR 7159, which would undo protections established by the new Big Cat Public Safety Act that was recently passed into law. This legislation would reopen the door to cruel cub petting encounters, allow the breeding and sale of big cats by non-zoological operations, and enable the import or export of big cats from foreign facilities. This is the reason why Allison can't be with us today. This bill received a hearing this morning, and we are working to ensure action on this bill stops there. So we've worked to rally strong opposition, secure a powerful witness to speak at the hearing about the danger of this bill, and engage supporters like law enforcement to speak with their representatives. So thank you to everyone who took action on this. Finally, the Captive Primate Safety Act. We're working on garnering support for this bill. Recently, ALDF submitted testimony and worked with coalition partners to provide questions to subcommittee members on a hearing highlighting the national security implications of wildlife trafficking. Representative Mike Quigley of Illinois, a sponsor of the Captive Primate Safety Act, was able to join this hearing and highlight the rising threat of illegally trafficked spider monkeys across the US-Mexico border. This illicit trade is driven by the primate pet trade, which is enabled by a patchwork of state laws addressing private primate ownership and exploited by traffickers to launder animals once they cross the border. The Captive Primate Safety Act would establish a much needed nationwide prohibition on the private possession of primates, and we're working to bring awareness to the wide-ranging domestic and international implications of the U.S. primate pet trade. And that's the federal overview, so I'll hand it back to you, Kim.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer. We have a final poll question before we reach the near conclusion. So if you could take just a moment to tell us which actions you would be most likely to take given everything that you've heard today. We hope that you'd be willing to participate in the legislative process and tell us which actions you would be most likely to take. Okay. Well, 80% of you said that you'd be willing to email or call a legislator. So we're going to count on that as we move through the legislative session. Be on the lookout for alerts coming soon. And with that, just wanted to remind you that this is just an overview of some of the key pieces of legislation that we're working on this year, but there's certainly more coming as sessions progress and more bills are introduced. You can stay up to date on all of our work at aldf.org/legislation. Please do visit our website to stay up to date and certainly join us on Facebook and X as well. And now is actually a great time to navigate to our website as the 2025 U.S. Animal Protection Laws Rankings Report was just posted last week. So please log on and check out where your state is located and the additional work to be done there. And with that, I think we're a little bit short on time.